I am going to hand you all 6 up front, because I would rather you get the value in 90 seconds than sit through a countdown for it. Here they are. 1. Light at night and a sleep window that keeps getting shorter. 2. Sitting for hours without breaking it up. 3. A breakfast with essentially no protein in it. 4. And this is the one I want you to actually stop cooking almost everything you eat, hot, dry, and browned. 5. Stress that never gets a recovery period. 6. The nightly drink that has stopped registering as a drink. None of those will surprise you as things that are broadly, vaguely bad for you. That is not the video. The video is what each one is doing at the level of the cell, which literature says so, and how confident we are allowed to be about each. Because they are not equally proven, and the person who tells you they are is not reading carefully. Standard reminder, before we go on. This is research translation, not personalized advice. If you are managing a condition or on medication, your physician is the right person to take any of these two. Let us get into it. Start with number 1, light at night, because it is the one people underrate the most, and it costs nothing to change. Every cell in your body keeps time, not the brain every cell. There is a molecular clock inside your liver cells, your muscle cells, your gut lining, and that clock decides when each tissue does its energy-hungry work, and when it does its repair and cleanup work. Those clocks are synchronized by a master clock in a small cluster of neurons above the roof of your mouth, and that master clock is set almost entirely by light hitting your eyes, not by your calendar, not by your intentions. Light. So here is what happens on an ordinary evening. It is 10 at night, the overhead lights are on, and there is a bright screen 40 centimeters from your face. That light reaches specialized cells in your retina, whose only job is to report ambient brightness to the master clock, and the report they file says, still daytime. Melatonin release, which was supposed to begin rising an hour ago, gets pushed back. And because every peripheral clock in your body takes its cue from that master, the whole schedule slides. Your liver starts its night shift late. So does the repair work. Now let me put numbers on this, because the numbers are what make it click. Light is measured in lux. A well-lit living room in the evening is somewhere in the range of 1 to 300 lux. An overcast winter morning outdoors is around 10,000. A bright summer day is 50,000 or more. So the gap between indoors lights on and outdoors 5 steps past your front door is not a matter of degree. It is 1 to 2 orders of magnitude, which means 2 things at once. It means the evening light in your house is far brighter than the biological night your clock evolved to read, and it means the daytime light in your house is nowhere near bright enough to set that clock properly. Most people are living in a permanent gray middle, too bright at 11 at night, far too dim at 9 in the morning, and a clock that never gets a strong signal at either end drifts. Then the alarm goes off at the same time it always does, and the window gets shortened from the other end. The effect that has drawn the most attention lately is on the brain's own drainage. Work by Macon Nedergaard and colleagues described a system of fluid channels in the brain that becomes dramatically more active during sleep, clearing metabolic waste that accumulates while you are awake, including proteins that aggregate in neurodegenerative disease. I will be straight with you. The details of that system are still being argued about in the literature, and there was a serious challenge to parts of it published recently. But the broad finding that the sleeping brain clears waste differently from the waking brain is not seriously in dispute, and neither is the association between chronically short sleep and worse outcomes across almost every system we measure. The fix is unglamorous, and it is two-sided, and most people only ever do half of it. Dim the room in the last hour, lamps rather than overheads, and get the bright screen further from your face or off entirely. That is the night half. The morning half is the one that actually gets skipped. Get outside within an hour or so of waking for 10 or 15 minutes on any kind of day, including a gray one. You are not doing it for the vitamin D, and you are not doing it for the exercise. You are giving the clock a signal loud enough to be unambiguous, so that the melatonin rise 14 or so hours later arrives on time. That is it. That is the whole intervention, and it is free, and it is the one I would rank first for effort to effect. Number 2, uninterrupted sitting. And I want to be precise, because the phrase sitting is the new smoking is bad science, and it has made this harder to talk about honestly. The thing the research keeps landing on is not total sitting time, it is unbroken sitting time. Those are different variables, and studies that separate them find that the breaks matter on their own. Here is the mechanism, and it is beautifully simple. Skeletal muscle takes glucose out of your blood by two routes. One requires insulin, the other requires contraction. The muscle pulls glucose in simply because it is working, no insulin needed. Sit still for 3 hours, and you have switched off the second route entirely, so your body has to handle every gram of glucose in your blood through the insulin channel alone. Do that for years, and you are asking one system to do the work of two. There is a second mechanism, in the leg muscles specifically. An enzyme called lipoprotein lipase, which pulls fat out of the bloodstream for the muscle to burn, drops sharply in inactive muscle. Mark Hamilton's group documented this. In the physiology of inactivity, the enzyme falls with inactivity in a way that just standing up and moving reverses. Now, the practical consequence that people find hardest to accept, so let me say it plainly, this is why the person who goes to the gym for an hour and then sits for 9 can still be in trouble, and it is not because the gym hour was wasted. It is because these are two separate variables with two separate effects, and one does not buy off the other. There is a term for it in the literature, the active couch potato. The hour of exercise does what exercise does. It does not switch the contraction route back on for the other 9 hours because the muscle was not contracting during them, which reframes what you are actually aiming at. The relevant unit of behavior is not exercise for an hour, but do not stay still for 2. A few minutes of walking every half hour is the intervention the literature keeps supporting, and note the saking the ones5.com Ferb. Walking, not standing. Standing up is better than not standing up, but standing still is still a still muscle. The contraction is the active ingredient. 2 minutes of actual walking beats 10 minutes of standing at a desk on this particular mechanism. Number 3, the protein-free breakfast. Toast and jam, cereal, coffee and a banana. Nothing wrong with any of them except what is missing. Here is the part that changes after 60 and that almost nobody is told. Building muscle protein is not a smooth, continuous process. It triggers when the amount of amino acid arriving in your blood crosses a threshold. Below the threshold, very little building happens. Above it, the machinery switches on, and the threshold rises with age. This is called anabolic resistance, and it means that a portion of protein, which would have been perfectly adequate at 35, may now land under the bar and do essentially nothing for your muscle. Douglas Padden-Jones, Blake Rasmussen and colleagues have spent years on this problem, and the practical conclusion from that body of work is consistent. Older adults need more protein per meal, and they need it spread across meals rather than piled into dinner, because each meal has to clear the bar on its own. A breakfast that clears nothing is a third of your day's chances thrown away. Here are the numbers the expert groups have converged on, and I give them to you as literature rather than as a prescription. The ProtAge study group and the ESPEN expert group both recommended that older adults take in more total protein than the standard adult figure in the region of 1 to 1.2 grams per kilogram of body weight per day, and higher again for people who are ill or recovering. And the per meal work points to roughly 25 to 30 grams of good quality protein at a sitting as the sort of amount that reliably clears the threshold in older adults. 25 to 30 grams is a more concrete thing than it sounds. It is about 4 eggs. It is a large tub of Greek yogurt with a handful of nuts. It is a modest tin of fish. It is a bowl of cottage cheese. It is not exotic and it is not expensive. And the point is only that toast and jam is approximately 0, and 0 cannot clear a threshold no matter how the rest of your day goes. Muscle is not decoration. It is the largest reservoir of amino acids you own, the biggest disposal site for blood glucose, and the single best predictor we have of whether you will still be independent in 15 years. Eggs, yogurt, cottage cheese, fish, a proper handful of nuts and seeds, the source matters less than the fact that something is there. And if you have kidney disease, this is precisely the paragraph you take to your physician rather than acting on, because protein targets are one of the places where general advice and individual medicine genuinely diverge. Now, number 4. This is the stop doing it one, and it is the one that got this video made, because it is the one almost nobody has heard of. When you cook food hot and dry, searing, grilling, roasting, frying, broiling, toasting sugars and proteins in that food react with each other and form a family of compounds called advanced glycation end products. Everyone shortens that to AGs, which is one of the more on-the-nose acronyms in science. Because the same reaction happens slowly inside your body over decades and is one of the mechanisms of biological aging. It is the reaction that browns a steak, browns toast, and browns the crust of bread. It is also, chemically, a cousin of what stiffens tissue over time. And I want to be careful about that word cousin, because it is the exact point where this topic usually goes wrong. Eating a brown steak does not deposit browning into your arteries. That is not the claim, and anyone making that claim is overselling. The claim is narrower and more interesting. The same class of chemistry that happens on the outside of your food over 10 minutes at 200 degrees also happens inside your tissues over 40 years at 37 degrees. Slowly, wherever sugars sit against long-lived proteins like collagen, the internal version is the one that matters for aging. The dietary version is a separate input whose contribution is still being quantified. Here is the finding that reorganized how I think about cooking. Jaime Uribarri, Helen Vlassara, and colleagues built a database of the AGE content of hundreds of foods and published it in the Journal of the American Dietetic Association in 2010. What they found is that the AGE content of a food depends far less on what the food is than on how it was cooked. The same piece of chicken, roasted versus boiled, differs by several fold. Dry heat drives the reaction. Water suppresses it. You cannot get above the boiling point of water in a pot of water, and the reaction needs the higher temperatures. Acid suppresses it too, which is why marinating in lemon juice or vinegar before cooking measurably lowers the AGEs formed. Read that middle sentence again, because it is the whole practical payload of this habit, not what the food is, how it was cooked. That means this is one of the very few dietary levers you can pull without giving anything up. You are not being asked to stop eating chicken. You are being asked to consider poaching it sometimes. Now, my honest read of the evidence, because this is where the internet runs off the road, the strongest part of the case is the chemistry and the food database. Those numbers are solid. The part that is still being worked out is exactly how much of what you eat gets absorbed and what it does once inside. Trials restricting dietary AGEs have shown reductions in markers of inflammation and oxidative stress in some populations, and the review literature in Advances in Nutrition treats the health links as plausible and important, but not settled. So I am not going to tell you that brown food is aging you at a measured rate. I am going to tell you that the amount of these compounds in your diet is largely under your control, that the change is nearly free, and that the downside of making it is zero. And the change is genuinely small. It is not stop eating meat. It is steam, poach, stew, braise, and slow cook more of the week, sear less of it. Marinate with something acidic before the pan 20 minutes in lemon juice or vinegar, which you were probably going to do for flavor anyway. Turn the heat down and take longer. Keep the lid on, because a lid keeps the moisture in, and the moisture is the thing suppressing the reaction. You are not removing food from your life. You are removing the char. Number 5, stress without recovery. And here I have to be careful, because there is a famous study about this that gets systematically overquoted, including by people who should know better. In 2004, Elisa Eppel, Elizabeth Blackburn, and colleagues published a study in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences looking at mothers caring for a chronically ill child. They measured perceived stress and telomere length, telomeres being the protective caps on the ends of chromosomes that shorten as cells divide. The women reporting the highest stress had shorter telomeres, and the size of the difference was described as comparable to a substantial number of additional years of aging. Here is what that study is and what it is not. It is a small, cross-sectional study, meaning it photographed one moment rather than following people forward. The famous 10 years of aging figure is a comparison across a group, not a measurement of anyone's body clock. And telomere length is one marker among several, not a verdict. What has held up in the larger literature since is the direction and the mechanism rather than the number. Chronically elevated stress hormones drive inflammation, disrupt sleep, and impair repair, and the tissues that divide most are the ones that show it first. So the useful version is not, stress is aging you 10 years. It is that the damaging pattern is stress without a recovery period, the physiological alarm running with no off signal. And I want to be exact about what that distinction means, because it is not a soft one. An acute stress response is not damage. It is a well-designed system doing its job. Energy released, heart rate up, attention narrowed, immune system primed. That system evolved for events that resolve. The harm comes from the second half, never arriving from the parasympathetic recovery, the return to baseline, being permanently deferred because the next thing is already here. The intervention supported by the research is anything that reliably produces the off signal, and there are several: sleep, real social contact, time outdoors, slow breathing, exercise. Note what they have in common. Not one of them is a way of thinking differently about your circumstances. They are all physiological. What is not supported is trying to think your way calm while the alarm keeps ringing, and if the thing driving the alarm is genuinely serious, a persistent low mood, or a burden you cannot put down, that is a conversation for a physician and not a habit to optimize. Quick one, how old are you right now? Put it in the comments. Which of these 6 matters most genuinely changes across the decades? And I want to see who is here. Number 6, the nightly drink. And I am going to do this without the sermon, because the sermon does not work and it is not my job. 2 things are true at once. First, the epidemiological picture that a glass of red wine is protective has weakened considerably. The apparent benefit at low intakes turned out, in a large body of reanalysis, to be substantially an artifact of the comparison group, the never drinkers. In old studies included people who had stopped drinking because they were already ill, which made the moderate drinkers look healthier than they were. Studies using genetic methods, which are far less vulnerable to that problem, have generally not found the protective effect. Second, the mechanism at the cellular level. Alcohol is processed to acetaldehyde, which is reactive and damaging, and that conversion consumes a coenzyme called NAD, a molecule your cells need for energy production and for the enzymes that carry out DNA repair. Your body will always prioritize clearing a toxin over doing maintenance. So the nightly drink is not neutral. It is a small nightly reallocation of resources away from repair. And then it lands back on habit number 1, which is why I put it last. Alcohol is a sedative, so it shortens the time it takes you to fall asleep. And almost everyone reads that as, "It helps me sleep." What it does to the rest of the night is the opposite. As it is metabolized, the sedation lifts, and there is a rebound in the second half of the night. Lighter sleep, more awakenings, more suppressed, and then disordered REM. So you fall asleep faster and you recover less. If you have ever had 4 hours in bed after a few drinks and woken at 3 exactly, wide awake, that is not bad luck. That is the mechanism running on schedule. I am not telling you to stop. I am telling you that the health case for the nightly glass is thinner than it was a decade ago, that the mechanism is real, and that the answer to, does this one matter, depends much more on the number of nights than on the number of glasses. Now let me tell you what is not on this list, because what a list leaves out is as informative as what it includes. There is no supplement on here. Not because supplements are all worthless, but because on the specific question of habits quietly aging your cells, the human evidence for any single pill is far weaker than the evidence for the 6 things I just gave you, and every one of these 6 is free. There is no single villain food on here. No seed oils, no red meat, no gluten, no sugar as a lone antagonist. Not because those debates are settled in either direction, but because the mechanism-level evidence for each is thinner and noisier than the evidence for sleep timing, muscle contraction, protein thresholds, cooking chemistry, recovery, and alcohol. I would rather give you 6 things I can defend than 9 things I cannot. And there is nothing here about a number on a scale, because on the mechanisms we have just discussed, body weight is largely downstream of them rather than upstream. The recap: light at night desynchronizes the clocks in every cell, and dim mornings starve the same clock of the signal it needs. Unbroken sitting switches off the contraction route for glucose and drops the fat-clearing enzyme in your legs, and the gym hour does not buy it back. Protein-free breakfasts miss a threshold that rises with age, roughly 25 to 30 grams per meal in the literature. Dry, browned cooking loads your diet with compounds you can cut several-fold by changing the method rather than the food. Stress without a recovery period keeps the alarm running, and the fix is physiological rather than mental, and the nightly drink spends the coenzyme your repair enzymes need, then wrecks the back half of your night. If you only do one, do number 4. It is the cheapest, it is the least known, and it is the only one on the list where the change is invisible from the outside. Nobody at your table will be able to tell. If you want to do 2, Add the morning light. 10 minutes outdoors, within an hour of waking. It costs you nothing but the 10 minutes, and it is the input the entire first habit runs on. No appointment is going to walk you through 6 mechanisms. In 20 minutes, there is no billing code for any of it, and there is nothing here for anybody to sell. Your habits are not moral failures. They are inputs, and inputs can be changed one at a time. Which of the 6 was yours? 1 through 6, tell me the number in the comments. I read them.
You made it to the end? Most people don't. So here's what comes next. After 55, your cells stop repairing the way they used to. They don't stop for good. They stop being fed. That's what the Becker protocol is for. 3 short guides, 1 for each part of your day. The 7 repair foods and a 30-day plan. The 8 foods that defend your DNA. And the last hour before bed that decides how you wake up. No pills, no miracle claims. Just food you already have. All 3 are waiting just below this video.